Okay. Hello, I'm Kenna, and today we are going to be talking with Luke Swass. He is a farmer with Springdale Farms. Luke, would you like to go ahead and just give us a little bit about the history of Springdale Farms?
Yeah, so Springdale Farms started the name in 1893. The farm was, or the family was here several years before that, just growing for themselves. And then the name Silver Springdale Farm started in 1893. First started out raising silver fox for pelts, for coats and hats and so on. And then that industry kind of dwindled out in the 30s, right around the wars. So that's when, at this time, it would have been my great grandpa and my grandpa. They got out of the fur business and went into the dairy business. So my grandma and grandpa continued that, the dairy herd, and built pretty big dairy within the state, pretty well recognized. And then it came time for my dad and my uncle to decide if they want to keep farming dairy or if they want to move away from that. So this was around the early 90s. And at that time, it was either get big in dairy or get out. So they decided to get out of the dairy business and move into vegetables. So at that point, they started growing fresh market vegetables. They liked it for some reasons, and then there's other reasons why they didn't like it. With the prices, you could see a big fluctuation from year to year, whether it was really good or it was really bad. They didn't really like the really bad, of course. So they kind of looked at the process market, and that process market was more consistent with prices. Of course, you didn't see the really highs, but you didn't see the lows either. So you could go year to year a lot better with those prices on. So as of now, it is my cousin and I are going to be the sixth generations on Springdale Farms. So my dad, my uncle are the fifth generation, and they're still the owners of the farm, with my cousin and I moving in. So that's
Okay.
all.
Can you give us just a little bit more detail on what kinds of vegetables you grow now?
Yeah, so we grow, starting out right away in the springtime, asparagus. And then we move into zucchini later in the summertime. And then in the fall, it's string beans, carrots, peas, and then three different types of squashes: butternut squash, a pumpkin, and then two pumpkin squashes. And then, of course, corn, wheat, and soybeans for rotation.
So what does that acreage look like then?
It's around 5,000 to 5,500 conventional acres, and then there's about 500 organic acres.
Do you know the percentage to like what does it take to grow those vegetables? How much acreage does that take versus the row crop?
I'd say about a third. Yeah, probably a third to half is vegetables, and then the rest is row crops.
Great. So now I'm going to ask a little bit more detail about you. So, what pathway did you take to get to this position?
So I graduated high school in 2015, and I went on to Michigan State, and pursued a degree in crop and soil science. I graduated from there in 2019. So I did the 4-year program there. And then I also had a minor horticulture. So it was a great program to be in. And I'm glad that I went on to keep doing that, even knowing that I was coming back to the farm. I learned a lot from Michigan State being in that program, made a lot of connections. So it was definitely worth it.
Are there any things in particular that you took away from that program that you're hoping to use in your future on the farm there?
Yeah, there's been some different cover crop techniques that I learned from there that we hadn't been doing. So I'm planning to, or hopefully going to bring those back here. And then just all of the soil fertility management practices that we've been learning down there. learning about. We've been bringing them back here and educating our workers and so on.
Now, you mentioned a little bit about growing some organic. How new is that? And I think you've also mentioned before that you do a lot with the organic. So do you want to maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the organic for us is fairly new. This will be I think it's our fourth year that we'll be doing organic. Um, and as of last year, I took over the certification process of becoming certified organic growers for certain crops that we have. Those crops are corn, hay, and then string beans and butternut squash and the pumpkin squash. So I went through the whole process, all the paperwork last spring for getting the certification. Had an audit last summer too that I had to show our certifier all of our acres and all the different practices we've been using to be certified organic growers. And then along with just the certification process, it's a lot more manual labor on weed control because we take away that tool from the conventionals where you could reuse a lot of herbicides. We can no longer do that with organic. So we have to get rid of weeds mechanically or by manual labor.
So you touched a little bit about maybe working with some certification process. Can you give maybe just some other examples of the kinds of things you do in your position there? Maybe take a conventional crop and walk through the process of that.
Well, all of the crops are relatively the same. The only difference is the growing days that it takes for the crop to actually mature and produce fruit. So pretty much everything is planted in the springtime. Those are long hours here. We're getting going. We're planting carrots actually right now. This is April 20th, planting carrots. So we'll hopefully wrap that up by in the next probably 3 days, probably. And then we'll be moving on towards corn and soybeans. And then at the end of May, we'll be getting into the squashes and peas. And then the end of June is usually string beans. So we'll start out planting, of course. We have all sorts of equipment with all these specialty vegetables that we have. A lot of them are custom built. We built them ourselves. So starts out with planting, and then we move on into summer where there's irrigation. We have a lot of center pivots that will water the soil. A lot of them are fed by wells. And then we also have other travelers is what we call them. They're just irrigation tools that we can use, moving portable irrigation tools. And then we also have cultivating the squashes and the organic crops too, of course, corn, the string beans. And then we just kind of hit the growing season from there, and we feed them the nutrients that they require. We'll take tissue samples throughout the growing time to figure out what the plant may need at that time. And then we'll figure out a good method to get those nutrients to the crop. We'll start harvesting in July, late July. That's zucchini harvest. So from late July all the way through to December is harvest season for us with the vegetables. So zucchini late July through August, and then we'll move into string beans and peas, and then the squashes, and then carrots and corn and soybeans too. So wheat is also late July. So it's kind of a quick overview of all of them.
Yeah, no, that was great. So it's a long process for sure. It takes a lot more time than what some people might think, right? So kind of going off of that,
Yeah.
what are some or are there any common issues within the career that like you think maybe community members or would be beneficial for community members to know about?
Yeah, so in the springtime, it starts out with asparagus, and there's two issues with that. The first issue is our labor, of course.
Mm.
Labor is becoming harder and harder to find. We hire a company that comes in and they have their own workers, and then they harvest for us all the asparagus. There's usually 42 seasonal workers that will come in to harvest our asparagus crop. So it's difficult to get those guys recruited and brought up. And then it's also just difficult to find local people too for help. No one really wants to do the hard work of farming. So you're kind of one in a million if you find one. The second issue with asparagus is the markets from out of the country. So Mexico and Peru are huge producers in asparagus. And if we could get them to just not produce for 10 months or 10 weeks out of the season, that would drastically help our prices on the asparagus. So for the community, it's great if they can learn to read where their food is coming from.
Mhm.
If they see it coming from Mexico and Peru, you know that it's traveled that many miles to get here. And you can usually tell the difference between local asparagus, stuff that's grown in Michigan or even California or Washington. Looks a lot better than the stuff produced from Mexico and Peru. So if we can get the community to buy local um, produce in their stores, that will help their local growers and all the local farmers within the state and their community.
Yeah, that's a great piece
So, and
of
then that just kind of that leads on to the other vegetables as well.
Mhm.
Fresh market butternut, fresh market zucchinis. So if the community can find ways to buy local, you'll tend to have a better selection and you help out your community too.
Yeah, I think that is a great piece of knowledge for the community to know. It's definitely interesting to watch those consumer trends and see where they're headed, and hopefully they're headed in the grow local direction.
Mhm.
Okay, Luke, well, I think to wrap it up today, if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to ask for a piece of advice for someone who might be looking to get into this kind of career.
Well, a big piece of advice is don't be afraid to get dirty. Um, this agricultural natural resources industry, you're outside, you're in the elements, you're going to get wet, you're going to get cold, and you're going to get warm, and it's going to be hot too. So don't be afraid to go out there and really show your green thumb, I guess, and don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of the long hours too. Farming, it's 100-hour weeks in the spring and 110-hour weeks in the fall. So you work hard, but you get a good benefit too from it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. Okay, Luke, that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for your time and good luck with your growing season.
all right. Thank you, Kenna.